Welcome, everybody. You are tuning in to the Ape and Bird NFT show with Greg and Steve. We are at episode 13 today. Steve, how are you feeling? You were nearly dead last week. Have we recovered?
A little bit. Lucky number 13. I spent a weekend with a COVID positive person. Luckily, I've dodged it so far and over the last couple of years. Still feeling like I've got a cold, which is pretty much a man flu for any guy that does have a cold. But no, feeling okay. The voice is still a bit not great, but I'll persevere through. How about you? What have you been doing this week? How are you feeling?
Yeah, so it's a bit happening at the moment. Don't have any concrete details to reveal today, but certainly NFT
Ooh.
Fest is starting to simmer behind the scenes. So there will be an event later this year. That's probably all I can say for now, but a standalone event too for those that were tuning in back at Blockchain Week in March, which Steve was one of our panelists at Marvel Stadium during the NFT Day. I like to call that sort of NFT Fest 1.5. That was incorporating our event into a much larger event in terms of Blockchain Week, where we had sort of, DeFi regulation, the whole gamut of topics across the blockchain ecosystem. So yeah, a standalone event later this year, and really looking forward to what we pull off there. So I'm pretty fresh still off those 6 weeks I spent in the US and observing what went well and what didn't go so well with other events. So I'm feeling sharp about what we're going to do with that.
Awesome. Well, that was the event in Melbourne, was the first ever one I had attended, and it was a fantastic event. Some great speakers. So looking forward to whatever you're building. Do you have sponsors and so on that are coming on board to help you along with this?
You just thrown me up. Thrown me up a little bit of a volleyball there. We will.
Well,
certainly
are you looking for sponsors?
We will be. We will be. I don't want to turn it into the shill fest for NFT Fest, but yeah, we will be. But a lot of planning to still do. But most importantly, I just feel like between myself and my co-founder, we'll have something pretty special, I think, to put on later this year, which is really exciting.
And is that Heath helps you with that, right?
Rochelle Cox. Cox is, Heath is definitely a contributor. I like to sort of say that there's a few friends of the program around sort of Friendly Jameson's another one as well. So you might be aware of Jameson. So we'll have more details on that in the coming weeks and months. I'm sure the Ape and Bird show will be a destination you'll be able to find out many of the sort of announcements we have to make. But let's get on to some of the stuff that's happened this week. Let's stay in the Australian theme. So for those that actually aren't aware, Magic Eden, which is sort of what most people consider the open sea of Solana with NFTs, they had quite a big announcement earlier this week. Steve, were you across that one?
Yes, I was. I hadn't actually, because I'm not part of Solana's network, I don't even have a wallet. I hadn't have heard of them until they started tweeting. And their social media guy for their Twitter's fantastic. So I learned of them and then paid attention once I learned that they were an Australian-based company as well. So yeah, I've been following along ever since, just to support another Aussie company in the space. And yeah, tell us the news of what happened with Magic Eden.
Yeah, so they are going to be integrating Ethereum NFTs, I believe, in the marketplace. And one of their first, again, staying in the Australian theme, but Vultura, for those that are aware of Vultura on Twitter and his initial project, Psychedelics Anonymous, they are launching a sister project, which is, according to this website, it's going to be the first ever cross-chain mintable Ethereum NFT collection to launch on Magic Eden, titled EZU. So I'm not sure if that's meant to be EZU or just EZU. I would say EZU. But Steve, to me, this looks like people are going to become walking billboards. And I'm going to read you a sentence here and then get your reaction.
Interesting.
We will create the first to earn economy rewarding consumers for wearing products with NFC chips tied to smart contracts with AR capabilities. What's your thoughts around being a walking billboard?
Geez, lots to unpack there. Lots of buzzwords. So first, congrats to Magic Eden on becoming Magic Ethan. I saw that tweet, and we saw OpenSea add Solana a while ago, and everyone wants competition for OpenSea because everyone feels how poor they do with their communication. But they still have, I think the number I saw was 95% of the turnover of ETH is on OpenSea, even though we do have competitors. So hopefully Magic Eden, now allowing ETH, drives a lot more competition, and we see from that improvement in all platforms. Onto walking billboards. Interesting. So I don't know. It sounds like we've all seen these RFID tokens now. I had just bought the Artifact and Nike ones. So these are, you get the hoodie, of course it's a hoodie, with an RFID token in there. And then with these, you can then sort of tap your phone to it and it reads it, pretty much like your credit card. Whenever you tap a pay and go, there's that little square, and they just implant it in the seams. And there's going to be a lot of use cases for this sort of stuff, like getting into events. You won't need a pass, you just need to wear the clothing. So this is interesting. Maybe it sounds like you're wearing a shirt that has advertising on it and the RFID, and somehow you tag your location with it. So if you're at a popular event wearing this advertising, you then will earn the token. And then, of course, they hope that the token is worth something. So, yeah, interesting. Always good to see new ideas. I haven't really looked into it, but I know there are a lot of influencers shilling this project. We know the Volterra roadmap of great marketing. I'm not a fan of the marketing, but he's really good at marketing NFT drops. And so likely a sellout on this one, but it does sound interesting.
Yeah, I actually met Voltura with the real name Lewis in Sydney a couple of weeks ago. He was a guest speaker on a panel, run by, I think, the organisation Blockchain Australia Young Professionals. It was essentially a career night of how to get into Web3. So they had about 4 or 5 speakers, and it was held at Immutable X's HQ. And, I'd heard varying things about Voltura. I'm certainly not in the Psychedelic Anonymous project. I think it was just one of those ones that I missed. But very articulate and candid speaker in Sydney. And I had the opportunity to speak to him for about 20 minutes after the event. Really nice guy, to be honest. I mean, my interactions with him was really positive. I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe gets involved in our event later this year as well, that I just mentioned off the top. But we had a really good chat. He's definitely got a really good business brain, and he, I think probably gets maybe knocked a little bit at times when people say, oh, you just throw up the mental health type of thing as a bit of a backstop. But I hearing his story, I think that sort of hits home pretty close for him in terms of some of the stuff that they're doing. Offering, even on this website here, it's talking about the receiving, Psychedelic Anonymous holders and this Easy You new NFT drop, receiving mental health therapy, coaching, educational resources, etc. As part of being the community. I mean, it's an interesting one for me, because I look at that and go, do we need an NFT to access those services, right? But again, it's sort of, I think experimentation is good. But yeah, this walking billboard thing, there's not a lot other than that sentence I read the listeners just before. So I suppose watch this space, but it's always interesting to see new things, I think.
Yeah, and that mental health thing, I remember Crypto Mauries had done something very similar. So their drop was based on the whole mental health space and having counselors in their Discord and everything. And really, in this space, taking care of your mental health is needed. And we've seen it a lot of people burning out and just not concentrating on other things. And this space can do it to you. It's happened to me where I'm just on Twitter nonstop, reading about the space nonstop. We're so excited about it, but sometimes we do forget that there is other life that goes on. So yeah, hopefully that does help. But yeah, do we need that as a selling point to NFT projects? Who knows? So we can talk still about Solana and I guess the crypto space now. There were 2 hacks this week. First, we had a bridge that got hacked for, I think, 600 million or something like that. And then just yesterday, we had Solana. Well, it wasn't Solana that got hacked. It was a wallet on the Solana ecosystem that did not store private keys properly. And those wallets got hacked. It's just as if MetaMask had stored your seed phrase incorrectly and that got found out. So really interesting there. What have you seen these hacks? What did you think of them? Is this just going to keep happening forever and ever until we have better security or better educated Web3 users?
Yeah, so I'm not going to pretend that I have the security expertise to be talking about, how these exploits have happened or where the sort of weak points are. But ultimately, I always think of the end user, and if you had some Solana sitting in that wallet, whatever the amount was, that's a very difficult scenario to deal with. Leaves a bad taste in your mouth, I think, and obviously gives more fuel for the fire for non-believers of Web3 and crypto in general to point to something else and say, look, see, we told you it's not going to work. Unfortunately, we know how nuanced the Web3 blockchain sort of NFT space is. You can't just batch everything in one big barrel. But unfortunately, with mainstream media and the way that things are perceived, it does generally get batched into one big thing. So I always think about, I don't see these latest 2 things this particular week derailing, us moving forwards as an industry too much, but I just don't think it helps, right? So, the less we can have of these, the better. Ironically, I'd never heard of Nomad before. I believe that's what it was called, the cross bridge or whatever it was. Yep. What is quite funny, I've just got it up on my screen right here, or maybe not funny, but ironical, is cyber brokers actually have one of their 10,000 collection that is called, so each of the cyber brokers has a name, right? And this name is called Nomad Exploit. And this, I'm being 100% serious. And this name wasn't, updated to reflect what happened this week. This tweet is from March 29th, and it's actually from this year, 2022, when someone purchased Nomad Exploit cyber brokers for 2 ETH. So it's very interesting that Josie, Bellini in her, in her lore and the way that she's building out cyber brokers had actually somewhat predicted this, maybe, I don't know. But it was actually her husband, Andrew Steinwald, that tweeted it out and said, you can't make this shit up. So very, very interesting with that one. The Solana one, I know a few people, I think that, I had a little bit taken, couple of hundred, a few thousand, this and that. There was also a number of cases I saw, even being in various Discords yesterday, that people had forgotten that they had moved their Solana to different wallets. So they had that heart in the mouth moment going, oh no, I got fleeced, but then later realized, oh no, that wallet actually had bugger all in it. So again, not a great thing for the space, but I don't think the world's going to end. But these are some of the things that I always read and observe with, say, people in, that are skew more around, Bitcoin maximalism or, ETH maxis, or just people that believe in ETH, a lot more is, they will point to scenarios like this and say, you said security doesn't matter, speed matters, but security matters when things like this happen, right? So there's obviously always trade-offs, but, I must admit, when I see these things happening, and similar to you, Steve, being probably more involved in the Ethereum ecosystem than, particularly around NFTs. I mean, I certainly have NFTs on Tezos and Flow and a few others, but ultimately, majority of my holdings are in Ethereum, and it does make you feel a little bit more comfortable when things like this happen, knowing that, there's that sort of additional security and decentralization of Ethereum.
Yeah, and the thing is, at the end of the day, it's the perception. If people outside the space that don't do much research, they hear there's a hack and they assume the network has been hacked. But all of the time, it's decentralized exchanges, all these software programs like Bridges, or this stable coin like Luna. It has been non-stop this year of every week there's been a hack. We had Axie Infinity's Ronin
that was
hacked
big
for a lot. And there's billions of dollars. And I had a conversation with a friend and he's like, well, it's crazy. You can't have anyone in this space because you're going to lose money. And then I brought up that no, scams and hacks happen all the time in the normal world. And I showed him an article that the ABC had about banks and how much money is lost every year. In Australia alone, which is a tiny country, it's like $6 billion is hacked from banks. We went as far as to figure out the entire world scams and then divide it and how much it would have been on crypto. And crypto is actually still safer than the general world in the amount that's been taken. But then he goes back to, well, the perception is that if you get scammed from your bank account, you'll get your money back. And then, of course, I did show him that that's not the case at all. He assumed there was a law that said banks have to pay you back. That's not true. Banks sometimes pay you back if you can prove you didn't give your account details, but it's more a marketing spend. So it's a very perception-based industry at the moment, and there's not great things happening, and it makes for great news articles that people outside will read. But the great thing is that each of these hacks, we learn lessons, and then those security guys will know what to do next time. And rinse and repeat. It's a very quick, iterative process, and we'll get to very secure programs on top of L1s as we go along.
Yeah, I think so. And in terms of sort of custody and the burden of looking after your own, login credentials and private keys and things like that, the words we hear in crypto, it is really a steep learning curve. And I know we've touched on this in previous episodes, and there's not a lot of people to help you, right, as well. And it's very difficult to seek out help sometimes because you could easily get fleeced by someone saying, oh, let me set up your wallet for you. I'll write down your seed for you, and we can both keep a copy. And when you build that up to a couple of grand, I'll just take that to another wallet. But ultimately, I see that getting a little bit easier, and I'm sure there will be custody solutions. I've even heard murmurs that Coinbase is going to probably etch into that territory in the coming sort of years around, okay, if you don't want to have the burden of looking after your own, security and private keys, you can pay a fee for service and essentially have someone else. But then, this is always the thing in this space, isn't it? You're going to have many of our listeners right now that, maybe skew pretty heavily on the decentralization scale that will say this is going against the grain of what we're trying to build. But ultimately, in the way I see it through my eyes, is I just don't think we're going to have, large chunks of society that are going to want to have that burden. I mean, everyone's got problems in their daily life and things they're dealing with. And, I think to have that responsibility of essentially having all your credentials on you, knowing that there's no backstop if something gets lost or something goes wrong, or there's a phishing hack or whatever it might be, I'm sure security is going to get better. Like I know Premint's doing a little bit around work with Vulcan now. They've acquired Vulcan, which potentially might be a bit of a competitor to, or already is a competitor to Collabland. But I see things getting incrementally better, but I don't see the masses all wanting to have that responsibility or burden by themselves.
Exactly. And we've also got the next Solana VC pump, which is Atmos coming out, which came out of the Meta, so Facebook's program, Diem. That's coming soon, and they're really concentrating on that whole wallet security issue. So, things are being built. But anyway, we're an NFT show. That's one tiny little part, but it is the bigger crypto space. Let's get on to NFT news. I guess the biggest news this week, where I saw a lot of both hatred and love, was the Tiffany & Co. collab with Punks and a 30 ETH sale price on the 250 NFTs. I didn't even know, but I think they've already sold them all. Have you looked into this? What are your thoughts?
I definitely read the article and sort of the Twitter thread earlier this week. I don't know if they've sold out. I think they have. I'm just going to try to pull that up right now. But my thoughts are, Steve, it's a net positive, the way that I see it. I think that, the brand alignment for me, like CryptoPunks and Tiffany, jewelry, high end, a lot of prestige about both brands for us, NFT nuts that are in the space. I think we could all agree that, Punks are, one of the top projects, if not the top project, when we think about, PFP collections and just the historical nature of Punks. Like, without CryptoPunks, there's no Bored Apes, there's none of these 10K PFP projects we saw explode in sort of 2021. So, I'm a fan of seeing it. I even had a couple of Instagram messages from friends of mine that are not on Twitter that were essentially sending me links to, high-end fashion blogs and Instagram accounts that have multi-million followers on Instagram that were essentially documenting and, providing insight and commentary around this particular partnership or this particular sort of drop from Tiffany. So again, just sort of just edging, brick by brick, edging our way out into sort of the masses, I think is a good thing. In terms of the price, like, I'm not sure if you mentioned it just then, Steve, but when I read this initially, was it a 30 ETH mint price or a suggestion of 30 ETH?
No, it was 30 ETH, which at the time was like 50,000 US dollars.
Yeah, so I'm just bringing up, it's nft.tiffany.com. So interesting they didn't try to roll with the .io or .xyz. But it actually looks to me, Steve, that there is another day and 6 hours to go until the mint. That's what it looks like on this website. So, it'll be interesting. I know that there was a few people in the Proof Discord that were talking about, is this a flip opportunity? I mean, that's that's a big risk, I think, if you're going to put down 30 ETH. But I think
it probably is.
Yeah, the sentiment I got, from most people in the space is it made sense for Tiffany, and it probably made sense for CryptoPunks. Having said that, I probably saw a few tweets from CryptoPunk holders that sort of said, we don't need to be doing this. But I think even Yuga Labs came out with a statement to say they were supporting this particular thing. I'll actually read it out. I've got it here. It says, while Yuga's, this is coming from at CryptoPunks NFTs on Twitter. So it's quote tweeted Tiffany and Co, who announced this pendant and this mint. And it said, while Yuga's not directly involved in the collaboration between DT Chain, Tiffany and Co, and Alex Arnold, it's a great example of the types of things Punks holders will be able to do with their IP licensing agreement, which we intend to release on the 15th of August. And then there's a bit of a thread around licensing. And I think we're going to touch a little bit more on just general IP licensing and NFTs later in the show, Steve. So we'll loop back on that one. But overall, I think it's a net positive to have brands like that. And like I said, you're branching out even further just into the radar and into the minds of people that may not be in the space otherwise.
Exactly. And look, there are a lot of CryptoPunk holders who are OG, probably did mint a lot of CryptoPunks and have made a huge profit. So 250 at 30 ETH is probably nothing for them. So I can see these selling out quite quickly. And as you mentioned, it probably is a good flip opportunity if you could get them. And just a Tiffany's piece probably does cost tens of thousands of dollars anyway. So really interesting. Good to see another big luxury brand in the space. And it does help link. You're getting a bit of that juice from Tiffany onto CryptoPunks that says high-end and so on. And of course, we also saw another high-end brand, Gucci. And is Tag Heuer high-end, or it's mid-level, I think, Tag. So both of those came out this week, and they've announced that in their stores they'll be accepting Ape token. And yeah, so just more and more luxury brands being part of Yuga.
Yeah, and I think this makes sense, right, for brands too, to not come in and just do what we saw a lot in 2021 and even early 2022 of dropping their own shitty collection of NFTs with no pulse on NFT culture, and essentially being a bit of an extraction mechanism because that's how they thought they were going to come into the NFT space. I like this more sort of just measured approach and just dipping into the community first and making just small announcements like you just referenced with Gucci and Tag around, accepting ape. Now, are they going to have a lot of sales during this?
Zero. There was one.
Yeah, there was one. There was definitely one I saw on Twitter, but I think again, it's about getting a feel for the space first and getting a taste of it rather than just coming in going, let's drop an NFT collection. Like I'm honestly baffled by the amount of brands and just people in general that think the right solution is just to drop an NFT collection because, you had a staff member or you read a piece of content or you listened to a podcast and you heard about NFTs for the first time or you read a headline and all of a sudden you think your brand needs to drop an NFT collection. Like the amount of spam I get on a daily basis, the equivalent I sort of think in my mind, it would be like, in 1995, 96, you sending me an email, Stephen, saying, let's drop a website. And my question back to you would be, about what? About what? So everyone wants to do an NFT collection, but there's no actual thought process behind it. It's just to grab a headline to say, we did an NFT collection. So I think, I just think people have got to be much more thoughtful about this.
Yeah, but we have seen Gucci and now Tiffany do what I feel is the smart thing. They partner with bigger NFT projects. So Gucci's actually, I've got a Gucci gold version of my ape through Beeple's 10K FT. I always get it wrong. But his project partnered with Gucci. And I had to buy on secondary because whatever, but it was 1 ETH that I ended up spending. And I got a Gucci gold ape character. So my gold ape wearing Gucci gear. I then used that in the Battle Town that is Beeple and his projects. That is linked to Yuga and all these other big things. And I received a Gucci material that says at the top, physical item attached. So Gucci's been working with them for a while. It's all going to come together. I think Gucci might be doing clothing for the other deeds or any virtual worlds and everything. And it just makes sense to start small, build up, show that you're in this space properly and go from there. So not that I would ever buy a Gucci thing, but I should have a Gucci piece coming to me through that NFT soon. So
you ooze
really
Gucci.
Cool.
You ooze Gucci.
I have the hairy chest. I'm assuming like the Italian in me. But
so if you're tuning in to the audio only version, I don't know what minute we are right now, but make sure you go to NFT's YouTube because Steve just showed a little bit of skin under the hoodie then. So we're going to have to change the rating of this particular episode.
But onto the ape token and being able to use it anywhere. It's through BitPay as well, which pretty much means any company can use BitPay and then say, click a little tick icon to say which ERC20 tokens you want to take. So it's not that big of a deal. We saw it with OpenSea accepting ape token during the land drop. I would assume barely anything gets used on OpenSea in ape token anymore. But it's the signal. Once again, we go back to all the signals, what the general public hears, and they're just seeing a snippet saying that this massive luxury brand is now taking this weird coin that's linked to an NFT project. And then, of course, they'll look into, well, if they are interested, they'll look further. But it's just that whole thing where you need a couple of points repeated a few times before you actually take notice and research it. Should we continue on with Yuga and the whole Bored Ape owners doing an interview this week?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was an article put out overnight in a magazine called Input Magazine. I don't know if you're Input Mag. I don't know if you've heard of that one before,
Never
Steve.
heard.
It's got
I believe it's brand new.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of it either. Looks like it's actually got quite a strong following. Whether those Twitter followers have been bought or not, I don't know. But yeah, ultimately, look, I had a quick skim over. It was quite a long article before, Steve, but we obviously saw, crypto Gaga and Gordon Goner get doxxed by that BuzzFeed article back in February, which was quite a bit of hysteria, caused around that. And then subsequently, they sort of dox their own selves when that sort of Web 2 versus Web 3 meme was sort of going around a little bit. But, I see this as a good thing. I've always felt like it was, a bunch of BS, what Ryder Rips and, that whole sort of drag the Yuga, it's tall poppy syndrome for me. I hate it when people try to cancel people and tear others down because it suits their own narrative, or just because they might be a bit spiteful in their own heart. So it's positive for me. I mean, I come from a comms background too. This is a bit of a PR exercise,
100%, yep.
No doubt. But I as a supporter in the camp of the Bored Ape founders, in terms of, they've had to deal with a lot of stuff and have their names dragged through mud for many, many, many months now, and just a bunch of, crap that's been thrown at them left, right, and center. So I'm glad that they're getting on the front foot. And, there was a video attached with this particular article as well. I'm sure if you go to, the website is inputmag.com, but I'm sure if you go to one of the Bored Ape founders' Twitter accounts, you'll find that as well. So yeah, interesting. I don't know what your take was on it, Steve.
Yeah, look, these guys have done amazing for what they've been through. Just imagine chatting to your mate and saying, "Oh, let's start a simple NFT project." It blows up. Your business becomes this billion-dollar company in the space of 12 months, and then you have to deal with all this hatred, this racism stuff and everything. It's amazing how sort of down to earth they've seemed this whole time. And as you said, this seems to be them now finally maybe getting a PR team and them saying, well, now's your time to shine, show people who you really are, get out there, start doing some interviews and everything. And in saying that, at every Ape Fest, at the last Ape Fest, they were there. I saw probably 1,000 pictures of Gordon and Gaga with every single owner that I follow. And yeah, it's just, like you said, tall poppy syndrome. I was very surprised that people, with this whole conspiracy thing, that people would believe it. I remember watching maybe 10, 15 minutes of that video. I think there was an hour long or an hour and a half long video put out a while ago. I watched 10 minutes and I just went, how can they even link this? Who would believe this? But then we were in groups, and I think I've mentioned this before, where people were like, oh, this is crazy. I'm going to have to sell my ape. I can't believe this is true. And you try to calm them, but it blew my mind that this was something that people believed. So good to see him on the front foot now. From what I've seen, they seem like down-to-earth, great guys that stumbled into something great and have been dealing with it really, really well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, whether the Gaio series of the world, or even I know Alexis Ohanian, co-founder of Reddit, he's obviously pretty prolific in the Web3 space, being the husband of Serena as well and a high-profile founder himself. I'm sure they're getting really good guidance from people that have been through similar scenarios, maybe not necessarily having their name put through mud around, racism and all this type of speculation. But, I think they've got good people that are sort of guiding them in the right direction. But I was pleased to see it. Is it a bit of PR spin for them? Yes, but I think you need that, right? Like when someone is throwing so much mud at you, or your team. Steve's just dying there for everyone again. I was pleased to see it. I think it was a good article and interesting. Sort of to get a little bit more background story, because I think we've spoke before, Steve, on the fact, with Justin Mazzell and Kevin Rose, they're building in public. They're always out there talking. The Bored Ape founders have always had a little bit more mystique about them. They've been behind the scenes. And in a way that can cost you when people are throwing mud at you if you don't get on the front foot initially, because you can let things simmer and people then speculate, like, why aren't you coming out with a public statement to sort of denounce or debunk these rumors going around. So I think this is what they've been, to a degree, backed into a corner to do, and I think it was pretty good response.
100%. I've got that you want to talk about IP rights and a Twitter thread that Josh Bobrovsky put out. So if you want to read, I guess, give the gist of that and explain your point of view.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce Josh's last name either. I think it's Bobowski. So shout out to
sounds right.
Yeah, shout out to @Josh Bobowski. Just look for an MF NFT with a green mohawk. I really like Josh's content. I think he comes from really good angles in some of his threads, etc., and thought pieces. But ultimately, Josh had a tweet the other night that said something around the lines of, today marks the beginning of the end of the value in owning your own IP rights to your punk, ape, and moonbird. And I think he's probably referring there, Steve, to that site you mentioned before, like Bored Jobs, I think it's called. So that was a site spun up to, like you said earlier, not only for Bored Apes, but also for punks and moonbirds. Maybe there's other NFT collections that are going to be included there where businesses can essentially, commission the use of your particular IP, of your PFP, and do whatever they want with it, really. And that's what we sort of saw the Bored Ape Yacht Club make famous last year in 2021, where they said, okay, and we knew that a lot of the FUD that over CryptoPunks and even Meebits at the time was you could do certain things commercially, but I think the line was that you could make up to $100,000, yeah, and then anything over that would need to be negotiated. I've always found the IP one interesting in the sense that when I heard Bored Ape said that, I thought, wow, that's kind of cool, because you've got these 10,000 holders now that can all contribute up to the overarching brand. It's not a CCO thing, so Creative Commons, for those that have sort of heard that terminology before. Example CCO projects are, Xcopy, Crypto Dick Butts. I think that's the first time we've referenced Crypto Dick Butts on this show.
Probably the third time.
Really? I would actually, I think we need to get more Crypto Dick Butts in our life, to be honest. But, MFers as well. I'm digressing a little bit. But ultimately, Bored Ape, I thought it was a very interesting concept. Like I thought about network marketing when I first heard about it too, like in terms of, if you're familiar with network marketing, you've got something like Herbalife or traditionally Amway, and you've got, all these distributors underneath essentially, and you've got the overarching brand, and they're sort of going out and selling to people. Yes, it's Steve's making the a figure of a pyramid right there. But ultimately, I think for Josh, I'll get back to what Josh said. So he said every brand, every and any brand will have access to the IP of any NFT that holders own the IP, and because each holder has their own self-interest in mind, they will sell according to what is best for them, not the overarching brand or other holders. And I think that there's a bit of truth in that, right? And, Josh goes on to say, as dilution occurs, it sort of will become less sexy, and you're going to have maybe, a moonbird that's on a $7 t-shirt in a store somewhere, but then you're going to have another moonbird or a CryptoPunk or whatever on maybe a high-end bottle of Shiraz wine that might cost $1,000 or whatever. So where do you get sort of this, you get a lot of discrepancy in, like, where does the brand sit? You mentioned that before with Tag Heuer before, Steve. Like, is that a top tier brand? Is that a medium tier brand? So that's, I think, the risk that some of these projects run. And if we look at sort of even something like Gary Vee with VeeFriends, Gary's been very intentional to say, I'm going to be in control, right? Like, I'm not giving you the IP rights over your, accountable ant or your, very, very, very lucky black cat or whatever. I'm driving that, and you essentially own the sort of collector card, the top tier collector card of this collection. So there's a lot of different ways that you can skin the cat here. But I suppose the point I wanted to make was, I don't disagree with what Josh is saying, but I also think it's a little bit too early to say this is not going to work. And I've got a few points to make. And I think one is there's a little bit of difference between the commercialization of your IP, which I think Josh is mainly talking about, but also just brand advocacy, right? And I think that's what I'm seeing a lot of people do, that either A, don't have the skills to commercialize something, or B, don't want to, like, they don't have the time or the desire to want to commercialize it, but they would love their Bored Ape on a cap that they're going to wear, or they're just their Bored, you're wearing your NFTs hoodie right now, Steve. I've got one of those, I wear my Cool Cats hoodie and I wear this, that, and the other. They are brands that I want to represent because I've got essentially some skin in the game, right? So I think there's a difference between advocacy and commercialization. But I also think without the commercialization too, we saw Snoop Dogg and Eminem drop a new track together at Ape Fest at NFT NYC. They both are Bored Ape holders. Snoop is actually doing some commercialization around his ape. He's named his ape Dr. Bombay. You had Dr. Bombay ice cream at the, as a pop-up stand at Ape Fest. He's done a merchandise line, et cetera, et cetera. So when you've got, like, is that a net positive for Bored Ape ecosystem with Snoop? I would argue definitely. The video had over, 1 million views, I think, within a couple of hours. So if you don't give this ability for holders to be able to do things creatively with their own individual IP, is the net result better by putting the clamps on, or is the net result, worse? And I think where it can get worse, and I know we were speaking off air before, Steve, that what do we do with the bad actors or bad apples, right? So if someone actually goes to commercialize their ape or puts their ape on something that is illegal or fosters hate speech or whatever it might be, that's where you get into a little bit of trouble. But I just think that, in this internet world we live in, and, things move so fast and we're based around memes, like, I just don't think you're going to stop this stuff anyway. So my take on it is I like this experiment, and maybe as a pretty big Moonbirds holder, it backfires, and maybe in a year's time or 2 years' time, Steve, I'm coming and crying and saying to you, it didn't work. But ultimately, I like the experiment, and I think that the overarching good that the community will want to do and take pride in with their products, like there's actually a Moonbirds gin that was announced a couple of days ago by Drew Barman, who's a collector in them. And that's sort of like, he's actually a high quality gin maker, right? So that one to me is I haven't tasted it yet, so I'm sort of, maybe giving him too much of a tick already. But ultimately, I think people are going to be quite thoughtful with this stuff too. I'm not sure if you're holding, a $200,000 Bored Ape that you're going to necessarily want to do $7 t-shirts. So I do agree that Josh has got some good points, but I also think that this is not a foregone conclusion. Anyway, that's a lot of downloading from me. Tell me your thoughts.
Oh, wow. Well, I think it's going to be a net positive, but he does have points. So this site, Bored Ape Jobs or whatever it is, I can see no big brands choosing to use it just because smaller brands will at the start, and big rare brands won't want to sort of link the same sort of thing. Like, let's just say Pepsi decided to put a Bored Ape on a bottle, on a can, and then some no-name drinks company can just go buy another ape and put it on their can. So in people's minds, are they the same thing as well? So I can see these big companies deciding to partner and use our community, but not actually sort of use these apes in their own products. But then personally, you've seen me use the gold ape in a video for NFTs. We have, for those that are listening, so I've been making a lot of merch, and you can probably see the logo of my Bored Ape on this shirt. We'll be selling that. I've also been talking to a really high-end gin company. I guess gin is a very on-brand thing for NFTs, but a gin company in Australia that sells gin, and I was going to put the gold ape on there, put some yellow food coloring into the gin, and have it a golden gin. The minimum that you have to buy makes it very cost prohibitive for me to get going, but it is something I probably will do. But yeah, there are negatives for giving out these IP rights. Like I've told, the one that I always go back to is like the first one to use it in a porno, and then you can just use it for so many bad things as well. But you are right that why would you do that? Why would you lower the thing? But then you have people like Ryder Rips, who we mentioned before, who can simply copy the ape and change it a little bit and then do whatever they want. So because it's in the public domain and Yuga don't seem all that worried about people sort of using them, anyone without even owning a NFT can sort of do something negative towards it. But yeah, cool experiment.
Let me make a bit of a point to this. So I think as the ecosystem matures and as we get more and more people flowing in from quote unquote sort of mainstream, do we not give consumers and just the everyday person enough credit in terms of them being able to be smart enough to make their own decisions of sort of what the intents were? So the example I would give there is if you're sponsoring, an athlete, and that athlete does something controversial and you're a sporting brand, is that a reputational risk to Reebok or Adidas or what the example at the time is? Yes, it is, right? But I think the majority of people understand that these deals are done obviously for a cash consideration. And just because an athlete comes out and says something controversial, that doesn't necessarily reflect the brand values or the reputation of Reebok or Adidas or whatever the example is. So back to your example of the bad actors, and I do think that, it's warranted what you say, but I don't think if a moonbird, God, our conversation's getting very weird today, but if a moonbird ends up in a porno, like you were saying, right, I don't think that necessarily says, well, Kevin Rose is, soliciting this or he's doing this and, the Moonbirds brand's just finished because one particular Moonbirds holder that had, maybe like a Ryder Rips of the world that had an ulterior motive to sort of drag the overarching Moonbirds brand through the mud. I'm not sure consumers are not smart enough to realize that, hey, and as we get more accustomed to sort of NFTs coming with IP rights, I just don't see it as I don't see the bad actor or bad apple necessarily, doing enough to tarnish the reputation of the brand. Where I think it's more of a issue, which Josh points out, is the dilution, right?
Yeah.
If too many people and too many holders are trying to do their own thing, and some of them don't have the capabilities or connections to do things that are thoughtful and that do have good, it's a good product in the overarching. If they just butcher everything and are using sites like this Board Jobs, and there's just, it becomes like a Target sale rack of Moonbirds merch, right? I think that's a bigger risk than the one-off or the two-off bad apple example. So, I think it's a fascinating discussion though. So anyway, just my two cents on that.
Yeah, just another experiment we're doing in this space. And yeah, like you said, when there's a bad apple, it's a weighing machine. There's more people doing a lot of good with their IP than bad. But yeah, if you see a golden board ape in Target or Kmart, you know I'm scraping the barrel there. Let's move on to another Moonbirds-esque one, but it's Grails 2. So Proof, which you are a member of, have released. Is this a yearly thing, I'm assuming, for the next 3 years?
There's going to be 3 per year is the intention.
Oh, so 3 per year. Wow.
3 per year. Yeah. So as a holder, that's music to my ears. So the first one was in sort of February. I think the reveal might have been in March. But ultimately, for those that don't know the backstory, this was the first quote unquote project that Kevin rolled out for the Proof Collective. So we minted our pass in December. We did actually have a collaboration drop with artist HeartU in January. I remember minting my emotes. There was around about 1,100 of those. And the Proof Collective got to mint for 0.05, which was very, very reasonable mint price. But ultimately, they moved on to Grails. This was an idea of Kevin's. So Kevin definitely skews, in his NFT upbringing, let's call it, on the generative art side. So Kevin was speaking to and had a lot of contacts in with artists, and there's a lot of artists still today in the Proof Collective Discord. So ultimately it was 20 artists. It was originally going to be 21, but one dropped off sort of last minute. So in Grails 1 was 20 artists incrementally on the website. Actually, if you go on the Grails website now, you'll see, I think, the first 4 or 5 pieces of art from Grails 2, but incrementally they will drip feed more and more, and they give us around about 2 or 3 weeks to essentially make our decision. The speculation is out of control in the Discord. It's quite fun. You know, you've got people like Trey Ratcliffe last time is a photographer, a very famous sort of photographer for what he does, and he's a great shit talker as well. So shout out to Trey. But he did a massive Twitter thread last time for Grails that said that what ended up being Gary V's piece of art was, he thought it was Jack Dorsey from Twitter. So he convinced a lot of people it was Jack Dorsey, and people minted because it was Jack Dorsey. And Trey is very, very outspoken and critical of Gary's VFriends art. So it was quite funny that he minted Jack Dorsey's, but it ended up being Gary V. So he hasn't lived that down for a while. But it's a fun experiment where ultimately as a holder, you're seeing the artwork, but you don't know who the artist is. But Kevin will leak out that, you know, there's a number of top 10 grossing artists in this particular Grails. So people are obviously looking at it through different lenses. They're saying, what one do I actually like, but what one might be a potential X copy, or what one might be a potential Tyler Hobbs or Dmitry Cherniak or whatever. So some of the more notable artists in Grails 1 were Tyler Hobbs, Dimitri, and then the one that I minted, I nailed it, to be honest, in Grails 1. It was a fair bit of luck, but I got the Protoglyph, which was by Lava Labs, and there was only 77 minted, because that's how it works. Like, you know, anyone can choose whatever they want, so you're going to have different quantities depending on people's speculation and who they think the artists are. So I think the Protoglyph was the 4th or 5th highest minted from a quantity perspective. But obviously 77 is not huge in the grand scheme of things. And the Protoglyph was essentially the piece of work, you know, that came before the Autoglyph collection. So I think it's 512 Autoglyphs. So I'm hoping that a big bag holder of Autoglyphs in about 10 years taps me on the shoulder and says, I would like one of those Protoglyphs, Greg. So if you're listening 10 years in the future, I'm ready to sell.
I believe yeah. Initially after that drop, it was like 90 ETH. The floor. There was
a sale that went for the Protoglyph for 80 ETH straight away, and then there was one shortly after for about 70. But interesting enough, in the when I say not the pre-reveal of who the artists were, because you can see the artwork, right? It's just a reveal of the actual artist. 1 or 2 of the Protoglyphs went for about 5 or 6 ETH, about 30 minutes, 60 minutes beforehand. So that would have been a hard pill to swallow. But they've been
Where floating are they around. Sitting now?
They're at about 42 ETH the other day when I looked.
Still very good.
Yeah, but there's only like 3 or 4 available out of the 77. So, you know, I know Punk 6529 is already a holder. DC Investors already a holder. So, you know, the Protoglyph was essentially the Grail of Grails in number 1. But yeah, really looking forward to all the speculation. And yeah, I think it's fun. You know, I was definitely in the PFP craze in 2021. I still love PFPs, but I got to admit the change of pace to doing something different and having this sort of gamified experience. It was during the reveal, the 90-minute YouTube reveal. I was on a Sunday morning. It was the most fun I've had in NFTs, honestly, just, you know, seeing Kevin craft the stories, and some of the artists will actually do artwork that are not in line with their traditional art because they want to sort of hide who they are, right? Exactly. And I believe for Grails 2, there's been some hints that maybe there'll be a little bit of a change in the artwork pre-reveal. So maybe only on a couple of them. So, you know, when I think about, is X copy potentially involved? Could there be a piece of static imagery that I'm looking at on the Grails 2 website that when the reveal happens, you know, becomes an X copy? So a little bit of fun for me over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and there are not many people in this space that could pull Grails off. And Kevin Rose is probably the only one that I know that has enough contacts to be able to do that. So yeah, very interesting. And like, even though I'm not a part of any of that ecosystem, I'll be watching. I did have a look at the site the other day when it came out, and it looks like there are a few artist pieces that you'd know straight away who they are. But like you said, it could be a surprise. They could be sort of faking you out, but it'll be really good to watch over the next couple of months.
And yeah, absolutely. And I think the one difference too, there's two primary differences from Grails 2 versus the inaugural one. There's 25 artists this time around instead of 20, so there are a few more artists. And Moonbird holders that have the Grails Cup on their head, which I think there's about 150, 160 of those. They are actually going to get a mint pass for this particular Grails, and that's the reason why there's been an increase in artists as well, to try to keep that sort of supply and demand down. There was a little bit of controversy around that Grails. From my understanding, the Moonbird holders with the Grails Cup will get a free mint this time around, but for future Grails drops, I believe it will be into a raffle, and it'll be only about 10 or 20 spots. So I think there was, again, back to what we've spoke about before, Steve, around Justin and Kevin over-communicating. I think there's been a little bit of confusion for Moonbird holders, where some thought if they had the Grail above their head, that was a guaranteed mint into all future Grails drops. Others, other collective members say, well, hang on, that's not fair, because, we bought a proof pass, and that's one of the big perks of being a proof pass holder, so you can't dilute it too much. So I would say they've sort of hit a happy medium at the moment. But I also wanted to mention that post to last time, where you had to authenticate that you had a Grail, that you had a proof pass to mint your Grail, we will be airdropped a Grails mint pass. And obviously some people will make the decision to sell that on secondary. So if you are interested in participating in Grails, for anyone listening, there will be an opportunity once those are airdropped to pick up one on secondary. Great.
We'll end with, I'm going to start trying to do a bit of an NFTs update each week as well. So at NFTs, we've hired T-Bar as our community manager. He's already started cleaning up the Discord, making it a lot more fun. A lot of projects at the moment, because we are in an NFT winter, they're just dead in Discord. Luckily, NFTs, we've had a fair few people still talking, but T-Bar has been fantastic. There's a lot of fun in there. So if you haven't been in the NFTs Discord for a while, jump back in, have some fun there. He's also going to start a token, a coin in there that is not an ERC20, but you will be able to get merch and some other prizes by a few fun things we're doing in there. I sent the jerseys to the render farm, so we're probably a month away from getting those jerseys in every team holder's hands. I cannot wait to get those in your hands, because they are looking fantastic. The final weekend, we had to scrap the initial 10,000 we did and spent ages on. We got a new sponsor at the last minute, and there were errors in the actual program code. So Joel and I were working non-stop for the past 2 weeks, and especially that last weekend. But that's pretty much it. I do have some cool news, but I'm under an NDA, so I'll probably have to share that in, I think it'll be about 2 or 3 weeks. But a really exciting development that I hope to share with you all soon.
That sounds super exciting. And while we're speaking about NFTs, I want to give a shout out to COO from NFT Sports Radio, Koo. I jumped on that podcast on Friday, and that is up now. I'm not sure what the Twitter handle is. I know I follow it, but NFT Sports Radio. So I did about a 40-minute interview with, is it Koo? Is it? I read it as COO. Yep. Koo. Yeah, so I did an interview with Koo, and that was a fun one, actually. So I actually gave a little bit of backstory, I think, on how we met Steve initially as well, and talked about my experience sort of getting in the Bored Ape ecosystem in May last year. So that was a fun one. So if you want to check that one out, NFT Sports Radio. I'm obviously biased as an NFT holder and your co-host, but I got to say it is still a fun community, a fun project. I think when you've got sports aligned to your NFT, you can just go in there and you can just chat NBA or AFL or NRL. It's a fun place to be if you like sports and NFTs. And Steve, your favorite part of the show, actually, our disclaimer. So just while we wrap up, we just want to remind our listeners, and thank you for sticking with us so far for our first 13 episodes. We are actually going to have Zeneca, I believe, on the show later this month, Steve. So we haven't locked Zeneca in yet, but we will be having him on as a guest soon. So that should be an exciting one. But just our regular disclaimer, the hosts, Steve and I, discuss all topics and products on this show for entertainment and educational purposes only. From time to time, we will refer to NFTs, products, protocols, and other items. By the way of example, this is not to be construed as endorsement or advice. You are responsible for DYOR, doing your own research. So with that said, thank you. Good to see you, Steve. You are looking a little bit better than last week.
No, I'm not.
You were looking quite pale and out of it last week. I think you'd just woken up from a nap. So nice to see that you are on the recovery curve.
Thank you, sir. Always good to see you. We will be back like every other week next week with a lot more. Oh, actually, on that. So we're going to have a weird one next week because I am going to try to have a social media blackout. I've got a lot of work to do for NF teams that requires just my time concentrating on that. So I've told Greg that I'm going to turn off Twitter, all social media. Even I'll probably not even be in the NF team's Discord. I'm going to try to have a blackout of the NFT space and crypto space. And then Greg's going to tell me everything that happened that week. So it should be an interesting one.
I think that actually sounds quite enticing in terms of just disconnecting. But I'm going to put it on the record that a billion things will happen now because you're going to be off the grid. And I think it's going to be the craziest week in NFTs since April. So there we go. Let's see how it plays out.
It'll be very interesting. Well, until then, that's a good reason to join in next week. See you guys later.
See you, everyone.